Hello and welcome to Beyond Day Zero. Today's episode is with Paul and Rina, who run Ceci in Oxford in the UK. Ceci is a company that provide goods on a circular refill model to a load of refill shops around the UK. So I've been working with them for, well, since the day we opened our shop 2.5 years ago. And I absolutely love their passion, the way they approach their work, their values, their goals, and everything about it, what they do. I've been really fortunate to have met them several times over the last couple of years, and we always have great conversations and always wish we could spend longer in each other's company. So it was really good to catch up and do this episode together. Right, I'll crack on, get straight on with the episode today. Thank you, both of you, for joining me. Do you want to do a bit of scene setting first? Tell us a bit about how you started Ceci, why you did, a bit of background information.
Oof. We're back in 2006 or earlier, really. Um, Young children. I had a fairly mundane job. Rena had had jobs, but had we'd found it difficult to give our children the attention and upbringing we wanted. So Rena very honorably backed out and became a stay-at-home mum. And we've always been environmentally engaged at some level or other. And I think we remember quite a few discussions about things that we might like to do based from a home-based project. We were thinking of making soups. We were thinking of making smoothies before innocent smoothie. But actually, primary school buyers group was something that we did. So we just started making orders to Infinity Foods, in bulk, and then gathering orders from the mums and dads of the kids in the class that our kids attended. So that's where it started.
Yeah. That's right. It's in so many levels for me. It's connected to how I grew up in El Salvador, but it's not necessarily and exclusively something that often people think is, in developing countries, you live more sustainably, and in more industrialized societies, that's disappeared. It hasn't completely disappeared. Many people that I have either listened to in podcasts or read about, including some of the well-known chefs today, talk about how they learned to cook from their grandparents, particularly their nanas. And so for me, growing up, it was very similar. At the age of 9, I could cook a meal and nothing wasted. And it's very natural. And you go to in every culture, in every country, there is a lot of that going on. Maybe in some societies more than others. That's true. And that we can get into how we get to the point of not cooking from scratch, and how we perceive doing that as either time consuming or expensive and unaffordable, all those things. But I mean, the other thing I would say is, for my experience in the kids' school was phenomenal, because when I was running a kids tuck shop in the school, obviously not for profit, just as a volunteer parent and for the fun of it.
Yeah.
I had the blessing of all of other parents who say, yeah, let's do it. My kids at home will not try that kind of apricot, or that sort of, this nuts or whatever. And we didn't in those days have so many restrictions in terms of nuts in schools in those days.
Yeah.
And I, to be honest, I don't actually, now I mention it, never came across a child who was in danger of eating nuts at that time.
Yeah.
So anyway, I did this tuck shop thing and got the kids from year 5 and year 6 involved in helping. They wanted to, so we said yes, we'll create groups that they can take turns every week. But it's beautiful because I would put little bowls testing, we're trying things for the kids to try, and the first 2 or 3 weeks the kids would look at these bowls. I only did it 1 day a week at break time. Was it 1 day a week or 2 days, I think? Yeah. And the kids would look at the stuff in the bowls and go, what is that? Because they were so used to having, snacks in wrappers in their pack lunches. And they were very colorful and, beautiful, shiny wrapper.
Yeah.
So they're looking at all these bowls here and they go, and what is that? Ooh, that's so dark. And it was, of course, unsulfured dark apricots.
Yeah.
And so they were looking at all these things and saying, and actually rejecting it in your face. Ooh, looks like poo. And it was just hilarious.
Yeah.
And I would just have a good laugh with them, and then the kids that were helping me would try and sell it, even though they hadn't tried it themselves.
Yeah.
It was just fantastic. But then eventually, and I kid you not, it didn't take more than 3 weeks for the kids to start actually trying. And we would sell things like, I don't know, little things for 10p or 20p, no more than 50p. Some kids did bring more money than others. And to cut the long story short, we had queues of children, and the kids who had more money to buy bought snacks for themselves and for the other kids. And they started with some of those organic little biscuits, in those days we used to buy those oat cakes, as well as the other snacks, just to encourage them through the biscuits. And it was just lovely to see the generosity and the kindness following from testing, from seeing that it's not that bad and telling the others, try it, it's not that bad, try one of mine. So before you knew it, they were all, buying it. And then the parents made comments that they actually, the kids mentioned that they were eating this weird food, at the tuck shop, and that they liked it. And that was, I think, how we felt that we could connect with the PTA and start more of like a buyers group, donating 5% of all the sales back to the PTA from all the sales. And before you knew it, other schools heard about it in Oxford City and preschools. And then the East Oxford Farmers Market Cooperative, which is our local farmers market, and it's a cooperative we're members of, also invited us along. And then more farmers markets opened up and they wanted what we had. And yes, this is probably how that naturally progressed. There was never a business plan or nothing like that. It was just, and it's even now, it continues to be a not-for-profit thing that we do.
Yeah. So, I could see how the principles of what you did led you to where you are now. For those people that will listen and don't know exactly what you're doing, do you want to describe what your operation currently is and the ethos behind it?
Yes, absolutely. Do you want to say something before I do?
Okay, so we set up Ceci food and household refills. And the Ceci comes from what Rina was describing. School Ethical Supplies Initiative is the SESI, because of this being getting started in working with schools. But very early on in that process, and I'm sure you'll see this as well, Mark, that as soon as you're in any kind of retailing, you start seeing immense amounts of packaging. Most of the stuff we were selling to begin with were little packets of rice or whatever, and we just quickly thought, no, we've got to do this differently. So we started buying the sacks and finding ways of scooping produce for people, repackaging it. We opened a little shop in our front room so people could come in and get stuff that way. And we found that people wanted detergents. And at that time, you had the choice of Ecova in 20-litre tubs or YOD in 15-litre tubs. And those tubs were going back to the distributor, and we thought back to the manufacturer. Some way down the line, that kind of stopped happening, and they didn't want to take their tubs back.
Yeah.
And that's about 2010, 11, 12, something like that.
Before then.
And before then.
Because we went to the party.
And so we thought, no, that's no good. We can't, this is a huge amount of plastic waste. So we started looking around at how we could make our own detergents. And that's now become the sort of main pillar of Ceci, is refillable detergent. And we try and take out all the single-use plastic in the whole supply chain from manufacturer to consumer.
And you're pretty effective at doing that. That's exactly what you do. It's working very well, and that circular refill model is something that I guess was relatively new, wasn't it? It wasn't something that anyone else was doing at the time.
And this is the thing. I mean, that is a very good point that you make there, in terms of it was relatively new at the time. In terms of when Ecova started doing this, they had a plant only in Belgium, and then there were lots of different people, perhaps like us, I imagine, emailing Ecova, and by that time also BioD, which also we came to refill when they did take the containers. We didn't realize that they weren't reusing the containers. We thought they were, but actually they were taking them back for recycle. But anyway, Ecova had the plant in Belgium, and then they informed customers like us that they would set up a plant in France. And we were very happy because we could see that to begin with, it's a good idea to start reusing the plastic, but then you have to factor in the carbon footprint of taking empty tubs back. It just doesn't add up.
Yeah.
So once you think about France, you think, well, France is probably much closer to us than Newcastle in any case. So it's absolutely fine for us to, but to continue doing this and supporting that without causing another problem, solving the plastic, but then adding on to carbon footprint.
And that's something that you, my impression of what you do, and perhaps you can explain how much of your thinking it does follow this sort of ethos, is that you are very aware of, you certainly don't kind of jump on solving one problem without considering the issues that are related. And because, as you say, you can't, supply chains, manufacturing, distribution, they're all complex. You can't change one aspect of it without affecting others, or without
pulling
in something else that might be less than ideal. And I think so. Yeah, it seems like you strive to try and tick as many boxes as you can.
You do. You. It's important not to be too dogmatic about a single issue, because they're all intertwined. We're seeing that at the moment. We've seen that over the last few years about palm oil, which is a more food-related issue. That palm oil is seen as a disaster, and indeed it has been. But the rush to find an alternative to palm oil potentially could create an even bigger disaster if we start ripping up all of the mangrove swamps in order to plant coconut, in order to get coconut oil derivatives. And actually, palm oil is incredibly more energy dense per hectare of land than coconut could ever be. So you'd have to have a vast area, all of the coastal regions around the world to produce enough coconut to replace the palm oil. So our thinking is that really, and I think a lot of people are getting on board with this, that we just have to make palm oil sustainable. Obviously, no more cutting of virgin forests, but existing plantations need to be made more sustainable and integrated into the biodiversity which they live within, because until such time as we don't need so much palm oil.
Yeah, I mean that's right, and I think when you look at how we can tackle an issue in context without missing the forest for the trees, I think you can look at how one solution is often disguised as clever marketing and branding, because, for example, we all feel really happy when we read things like zero palm oil.
Yeah.
But then we are so busy in our lives, paying bills, getting dinner ready, worrying about that little thing in our job and so on, to actually make that space in our minds to question, okay, if it says it's not palm oil there, what is instead? Or if the label says sustainably sourced palm oil, we use it ourselves, and we are very self-critical of that and want to be transparent and say, look, this may be sustainably sourced and RSPO certified, but what does that mean? And so first of all, very few people realize, and Paul, where I met Paul back in El Salvador many years ago, while we both worked in lots of different kind of cooperatives, you've seen the marshes in El Salvador. Now, marshes are very complex environments, and they are host to the most rich and perhaps even yet not fully discovered biodiversity, almost by living microorganisms. So the difference between, for example, a monocrop like coconut and palm is if you leave the Indonesian forest alone for 15 years, that forest will regenerate. It'll restore itself. Okay. But you cannot recreate a mangrove. They don't come back.
Yeah.
And I mean the damage that it caused, not just for the loss of biodiversity, but also for the livelihoods of indigenous people that have lived for thousands of years in coastal areas where sea storms and floodings and things like that, the marsh protects them. That disappears because of our appetite for products that, in our mind, they look ethical and all natural. So it challenges the way of thinking, where we think we can either panic about it and think, oh, what can I do? Or we might take hope in the truthful questions, in the uncomfortable truths, the answer, and then look at the thing a bit more broader, see that we are connected with everybody else, and the creatures that live in those environments, and other humans too. So maybe look at how we source our ingredients in a much more holistic way. Holistic is perhaps not the word, but I mean, agroforestry deals with some of these concepts. And we're talking about relying not on one crop, one monocrop, even palm oil being ideal in terms of, more oil per yield. More yield per hectare of land. Even then, that's not good enough. We have to look at biodiversifying our own crops as well.
Otherwise we put, metaphorically, putting all our eggs in one basket, aren't we? If something happens in the future, who knows, some pest or something like that wipes out huge swathes of palm oil plantation.
And that's right. But also we need to try and be less scared of the truth. And so, for example, we need to be a bit more bold so that we can have that open conversation between each other. And for example, what does RSPO mean? One of the things that I have come to learn through research, but also through being so lucky to have experts in Oxford at an academic level, as well as people who both from academia as well as growing up in Indonesia can tell you the experience and how the forest was when they were little. And they now teach in Oxford and so on. And it's interesting to hear those experiences, because the RSPO is now again using the also powerful marketing tool, misleading us to believe that this palm oil is ethical, as if the RSPO has gone and made it ethical somewhere else. The RSPO didn't go to influence anyone to make those crops ethically grown. They were already being grown ethically in some parts of Africa and Latin America. And what they've done is that, the market has finished with Indonesia, and just for a small percentage of so-called vegetable sourced ethical products. And now that they can't no longer touch that land, they're seeking to do the same with some countries in Africa and Latin America. But having learned some lessons, of course, the market will not quite do the same form of damage. But and also those countries always have a tradition of growing palm sustainably anyway. But what it means is that when you grow it sustainably, you don't have enough for the eco-consumerism appetite of the market. And so this leads to different questions. One, can those countries in Africa and Latin America who always grew palm sustainably, hold fire and say, and stamp their feet and say, no, this is our surplus. That's what you can have. You shall have no more. Do they have the autonomy to say that to a global market? If even countries like ours here in the UK find it hard to fight those pressures. And the other is, can we, customers, see that connection and consume less?
It's a big issue, isn't it? The education of consumers. the people that we work with, the people that we, both the sort of businesses that we have, the people that we connect with, obviously you have direct links with customers as well. And it's an interesting one. As you're saying, because those countries that you described that are doing, that are growing ethically and always have, we're not very kind to them in the Western world. We're not often paying. They're not living. We live very, very comfortable lives in comparison, don't we? And we don't often pay fair price, the true cost of goods that we extract from them. And you can understand why they might step, in that sort of situation where they're under real pressure and their livelihoods and their living conditions dictate that they might need a little bit more. They ought to be getting paid more in a lot of cases, and you can understand why they might be drawn into trying to produce more, because if everything was fair and equitable, they wouldn't need to. And like you say, Rina, demand does come into it as well if we consumed less. But as things are, we don't share the wealth, and it's problematic.
But it comes to hunt us as well, because it comes to bite us, is the right phrase to use. Because as we disempower indigenous communities in other parts of the world, they ceased to have the energy, the time, the resources, and the influence to keep guarding the last bits of nature that we have. Because let's not forget, communities that are still producing anything in a sustainable way are the last guardians of the environment.
So it's interesting this, and obviously Rina's from El Salvador. Before an earlier part of my life, I spent a lot of time in Africa and Central America working with agricultural cooperatives, and there's always this strange reality that the agricultural producer is always at the bottom of the pile, the worst paid. And yet they're producing the very stuff of life, aren't they? It's a paradox. And so we've always been, one of the long-term aims that is kind of just there on the shelf, but one day, and we're getting closer to this in the last few months, that we would love to have a trading relationship direct to producers around the world, maybe coffee or any of those kind of cocoa, or some of the Central American agricultural products are really hardly feature in Western Europe. But in order to be able to form that, which is coined the phrase fair trade, which is one of the most brilliant concepts that has arisen in the kind of work we do over the last few decades, and unfortunately has almost not grown as powerfully as one would have hoped into the mainstream. It's just a fringe thing, isn't it? Fair trade. Number of products in the supermarkets that are fair trade has actually shrunk over the last few years, which is shocking and terrible. But so there's a reality about the economic system that is keeping the agricultural producers at the bottom, and that is essentially causing a lot of these problems because, as you say, they can't help but be tempted to get involved with big companies and their promises that if you buy their pesticides or you buy their hybrid seeds, you're going to get a bigger yield. And they get tied into that terrible economy, or they just go bankrupt and lose their land to bigger producers, So I'm afraid to say that is a facet of the capitalist economy, that because there are millions of producers, they have no power to negotiate. The buyers, the traders, the commodity traders set the prices because the producers can't set them. There's too many of them and they're all in competition with each other. So we have to find a different way of trading these vital products so that everybody in the supply chain gets a fair cut of the cake, really.
It's I think you're absolutely right that relationship with suppliers where potentially you can start to cut out the middlemen and work directly. I know I see some of it happening in for instance in Buxton, our coffee roastery. They work directly with coffee growers in a lot of cases, and Ian is very knowledgeable about what he does. He's we've often had conversations, and I hope he'll be on a podcast in the future because he's got a lot of knowledge. He's very passionate about the sustainability of what he does and treating the farmers fairly so that they're getting paid fairly. And it's not just that they're getting paid fairly, it's, as you said, Paul, so that they're no longer at the mercy of the commodities market. I've seen there's a guy that represents a collective of Brazilian coffee farmers who has got a working relationship with Ian, and he's been over to the UK. I met him a couple of years ago, and I see some of his social media things that he puts out, and it's really, really informative, and it's a sort of issue that lots more people need to understand about how they're, exactly as you described, Paul, they're put under such pressure. They're tied in by commodities dealers to produce for a future season, a large bulk, and they kind of, again, they're putting all their eggs in one basket because they're they see they might be getting paid less in that amount, but they're guaranteed an income when they really need it, and then their crop fails, and that's disaster.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think, but also, whilst we're looking at food this way, there's another way of looking at food, where we can let's remember one of the things that we've distanced ourselves from, and it's said many times that it doesn't get old, is to stick to the seasons, and that goes for imports as well as stuff we grow within our own countries. And I think whilst I think I wouldn't want not to have coffee, and let's hope we don't get to the disgraceful state where carbon footprint is gone so ballistic that if we can no longer have coffee, and so we don't want that. We all like our coffee, but I think that there are ways of looking around things as a treat, and so when things are a treat, we change the way we look at things. We look after them more. Whereas if we're looking, since we're zero wasters here, we're looking at things that it's not just that they become cheap, but they're there all year round, and they're not in a measure of abundance, but in a measure of more than we can consume, and then we throw it away. And with that sort of approach to any sort of production in food, we are not surprised that then we see these connections between food waste as well as packaging as a problem to attach to it. I think one of the things that we can, lots of climate action groups and community groups have been working in the last few years in order to look at food differently is localism and foraging, and looking inwards a little bit more and seeing, what do we have? We've got nettle. Well, we can make nettle soup. And whilst it's true that we can't survive a whole winter on nettle soup, it's delicious and we can have it alongside other alternatives.
Yeah.
And I think that's another important thing to work on, as well as the coffee, as well as these other things, you know. Yeah,
definitely. Something else I wanted to ask you about. So I often, and it's why I started the podcast, I often feel frustrated with because I feel like whilst, I decided to do something that I valued, in terms of opening our shop, and, it's been a great part, and it is a great part of the community. There are lots and lots of other issues that link to what we do. And so plastic waste was why shops like ours kind of came into being. After being in that business for 2.5 years, I was at the point, and it happened probably pre-pandemic, really. I got to the point where I obviously learned quite a lot about other issues that are related, and then I've been dissatisfied that I can't kind of bring other people along for the journey with regards to those other issues and educate people about all the other stuff, because it's, I found as a consumer, as you were saying, Rina, with regards to labeling and palm oil and what big companies do put on their packets or don't put on their packets, and they almost sell you a story that they're solving a problem for you when they're really not. It's very difficult to get across to people, look, this is complicated. I realize how hard it is to think about all this stuff, but we can do the hard thinking for you. I mean, I'm at the point where we're about to diversify what we do in the shop a bit. So whilst plastic packaging is a big part of the saving that we make, we're also going to start having some stuff that will be packaged, and we're going to start having organic fruit and veg, because there's a lot of other issues, and it'll be a way of talking to people about those other issues, But how the heck do we convince people, to go with us, like with what you do? How do you get people on board with what you're doing when we're faced with so many messages day by day that might be trying to sell us a less ethical alternative?
That's a very good question.
We try not to burn out is point number one.
That's a very good point.
You can't solve all of these problems. You can't solve them, we can't solve them. And you're always going to get rebuffed sometimes along the way. But think even over those last few years, what a transformation in the psyche of the nation about plastic packaging. People really have understood, haven't they, in large part, that is a problem. 5 years ago, I don't know, maybe 1 in 100 people really knew anything about it. And that's obviously because it hits the mainstream, and David Attenborough does his shows about it and things like that.
And Hugh and the BBC.
Hugh, But they wouldn't have done it if people hadn't done all sorts of things on the ground and started talking about it, and showing initiative and being proactive. So these other issues that are coming through that maybe you are thinking about now, but you see there's not really any understanding or knowledge in the community yet, that will happen too. And it feels like a long time. It feels like a slog. Hopefully the positivity day to day of actually having a really fantastic job that you've made yourself is keeps life sweet. And then these changes are happening really fast now. I mean, in a world of communication, stuff is moving faster than it's ever done before. Of course, the problems are coming up on us faster than they ever have before.
Yeah.
But we are matching it, I hope.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would I completely agree with what you're saying, Paul, and I'd love to hear what your thoughts are there as well, Mark. But I think one of the things that, well, 1, 2, 3 things, if I can say them very quickly.
You can do them all.
Yeah. So one of them is it's about the community, and we often hear when we think about mother and child, there is a phrase that says, if the mother is well, the child will be well. That could apply to the father too, of course. So with the community, if the community is well, the rest of us will be well. And I think, and that, I think community is overused sometimes, especially when we are being sold a particular narrative about globalism, the global community. And yes, it does mean something, but not what we are being fed that it means. But our local community, I think, is our home. And I think that's one of the powerful things that will keep us nourished. Because one of the things, I mean, I made a joke sometimes. I used to say, well, our family don't practice a religion. And whilst other people go to mass on Sunday, we go to the farmers markets on weekends. And we, you know, we had stalls at farmers markets Saturdays and Sundays, north, south, east, west of Oxford City. And for a few years, it was very energizing rather than tiring. You have to put the hard work through, but you got that back. And so this brings me to the second thing, the changes that happen that you cannot immediately monetize are the most important and prevalent. And so that's the second one. And then I think the third one is changes that are organic and relatively slow. And I know our planet is not waiting, and I know Greta quite rightly says, you know, our house is on fire. But even when your house is on fire, you have to keep your head cool and focused so that you can make your moves calculated and get, you know, steer change in the right direction. And I think that's quite important. And if we can able to do that, we will stay replenished and we will not burn out before the house burns.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's good positivity from both of you there. Yeah, thank you for that. I think this is what normally happens. I write down a load of things that I want to get in, and quite naturally they get covered anyway, which is great. It's brilliant. Do tell us though about the range of things that you're currently offering with Ceci. You know, you mentioned it became all about detergents, and that was, well, I won't speak for you, but explain how that went and then how you've diversified your range recently. And my impression is that you're doing more and more of that as opportunities arise.
Yes.
I'd actually like to take that one just to go into the chronology of this.
Yeah.
So and to put it on record, because you know, sometimes people get confused about what Ceci is. I mean, you know, Sassy, yes, we started in the shed of a primary school, and I can tell you, we had about 8 different addresses along in all these 15 years, and including our homes. But yes, what kind of products and how did that evolve? So as Paul said earlier, we started with ethical foods, and then supporting e-cover and by the and then around 2013, somebody on Twitter got in touch, and they said, we see your frustration with packaging, what are you going to do about it? And then we were sharing this, okay, we've been researching formulas for all these years, and we are not going to go on this occasion on what we found out, but we were, let's say, disappointed about even some so-called ecological brands out in the market, because we felt that they felt short of what the customer expected. And so we felt at that time, okay, if we start our own brand, how we will do it, and created those formulas. You start by eliminating what ingredients you don't want.
Yeah.
And you don't learn it overnight. You don't learn that overnight. Now, one of the things I'd like to say here is detergents is not the most complicated chemistry in the world. We have been making detergents since the beginning of times. I mean, the South Americans in the Andes are well known for using quinoa, the saponification of quinoa.
Okay.
And every civilization has found a way of saponifying vegetable oil. And often we talk about the Castile, which is called Castile, but actually, was a recipe invented in Aleppo thousands of years ago.
Okay.
So that's not a exclusive chemistry out there, but the way these detergents were produced were geared to maximize profit at any cost, regardless of what's happening to the planet.
Yeah.
And everyone in it. Now, so what we felt was we could solve 2 problems. We will not start perfect, and indeed we didn't. The first generation of Ceci products, I can't tell you that we were proud of them. They were horrible. Bright green, bright blue. We didn't even expect that, because our producers thought it would be nice to make them like this, and we had to come back, and we spent years, funnily enough, showing our chemists the path on what not to do. And just by saying what not to do, they were learning a lot from us, and we were also learning about expectations. One of the things that we often say is that marketing is a much more powerful tool than education. We are making a massive fuss around ecological products, ecological detergents, for example. But actually, believe me, it's one of the simplest forms of chemistry next to cooking that you can actually. Cooking may be far more complicated than making detergent, but I think it's how we then developed those formulas over the years brought us to think of expanding that range, because for staff it's helpful to be in Oxford, I have to say, although that might have happened in any city, but a lot of people coming to the farmers markets who happen to be scientists also taught us a lot. We sometimes wouldn't spot a particular chemical that we didn't know much about, and they'd say, you've got this chemical here. Why is it in there? And we'll say, we're not sure. Tell us about it. So we've had, thankfully, a very merciful, kind, trusting, and open customer base in Oxford that took us also in that journey of learning together. And that's how those formulas have developed. We immediately have got from 2013, when we started those formulas, we only were supplying them in Oxfordshire. In fact, we started in Oxford, and then our cooperative, of which Ceci is a member, Community Action Group, said, would you like to spread your, detergents beyond Oxford City into other CAGs? And CAGs is what we call ourselves, for community action groups.
Yeah.
Which is, now is over 80 climate action groups of us. So we said yes. We kept saying yes to lots of different things, and that was one of them. So we, from 2013 until 2017, right? You develop your dispensers. Paul in his spare time, for, when he wasn't in his full-time job, was developing these refill dispensers. And then in 2018, March 2018, having people coming from London and other parts of the UK who were hoping to set up zero waste shops, we decided to launch a workshop, a free workshop, using food from the food bank, making the food ourselves, etc. So we ran a free workshop and invited along our two sister organizations, Good Food Oxford and CAGS, to join that workshop. And to our surprise, people from different parts of the country came to the workshop, including one person from Emmaus in Suffolk. And it was like, we couldn't believe it. And we ran out of places. And we ran this workshop on how to set up a zero waste shop, although we were just learning just as much from other people as well. Mm. It's always the case, if it's not a good event if you're not learning from the others.
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
So it was fantastic. You felt that energy and that connection with other people who had the same concerns as you guys have at day zero and we have. And I kid you not, within the week, they were all connecting us with other people setting up zero waste shops in the country. And that's how from 2018, at that point, I had to make that decision. I wasn't sure at that time. Paul was on his full-time job, and I wasn't sure whether I should pursue a master's, which I had an opportunity to do here in Oxford.
Yeah.
Or should I go back into international development, which is what I had done before, working with cooperatives, or do I, I've learned so much here, do I follow this? Is this a call?
Yeah.
So we decided to go with that, and a year later, Paul joined in 2019, and I think here we are, developing more products.
So having set up the basic infrastructure to get products in, decanted, and out to traders, and then the empties back, then obviously you can't help but see other products that could be done in the same way. So the shampoos and conditioners and so on. And then back into foods. So we're now doing a zero waste chocolate couverture, and snack foods like crisps and other things like that. Again, looking for things where if we can help the producer make it with the packaging so that it's returnable, washable, reusable, it's just cutting out the plastic waste and utilizing the network.
Yeah.
So that our vans, as they are at the moment, are fully packed, and they go out with produce to shops, and then on the way back they'll stop at a producer and collect fresh produce, drop off empties and collect fresh produce that comes back to the depot, so that you're trying to use both the out journey and the return journey to reduce the carbon output of the whole network. And of course, we've got big ideas about how we could take that to the next level and completely remove the fossil fuels from that delivery network and properly make it a network which joins producers, us as a distributor, and Day Zero as a retail outlet, and many other retail outlets in a mutually supportive network that helps everybody in a fair trade way. Everybody needs to make an adequate living, and no part of the network can do this as a volunteer. We all need to earn a living so that we all thrive and survive in a very competitive, changing environment. We're seeing it's difficult for the zero waste retailers, obviously from the pandemic, but we know in the future, as the big corporates finally are dragged into taking the removal of packaging seriously, which they really haven't done yet, it's going to be a tricky environment for many independent traders, as it has been. If you look back in history at the Whole Foods movement of the 70s that spawned massive numbers of Whole Food shops, a few of which have survived through to the present day. So we want all of these amazing independent retailers to survive, but we've got to get together to support each other in what could become quite a competitive, harsh environment.
I think that's very true, and I think there are messages that we need to get across to our customers, and I think also, as your suggestion, that network, there needs to be a network in place. I've really felt the lack of that in some ways. Not saying it's anything that anyone in particular is not doing, but I just feel like there's potential to do so much more together.
I think that's true.
But there's also, I think, in a way, we live in a culture that swings from one extreme to another, and that might make it difficult to engage communities and to help connection, because on the one hand, there's two things extrapolating. For example, there is a certain culture of blaming, for example, and there is another culture of taking guilt, and it can work in many ways. People trying to do the good thing feel guilt because they're not doing enough, and that can wear you out. People who resist change, often they resist change because campaigners in good faith, with good intentions, but with that necessary energy and aggressivity that is necessary, that's important at the very beginning of a movement. It has to calm down in the middle, but the very beginning of any campaign has got to, in order to be listened to get attention, has got to be noisy, aggressive, in your face. And of course, the first reaction can be burying our heads in the sand, and actually resisting and not wanting, because you might feel judged. You might feel, that other people are preaching and wagging the finger. So you say, no, I'm not gonna pander to that. So you got those two things going on. But in the background of that, because those are just, sort of like on your skin kind of things, deeper in what's prompting us to to feel that way, I think is the fact that we're also, alongside the blame thing, we also have this expectation built into us by the free market that we can't live without convenience in everything we want or do, but two, that somebody out there is solving our problems. This is how plastic was overlooked as an issue, because we truly believe that this was being solved by someone. But so the next thing now is electric vehicles, which brings me to what Paul was saying earlier. Now, George Monbiot and Chris Packham and many other, writers and think tanks out there are saying it's not the solution. It's part of that journey, but it's not the solution. And even if you talk about electric tricycles, that's brilliant. That's one component. But we go back again, and I cannot say enough, engaging the community is, at the end of the day, the most important thing. Because once you do that, and we have experienced that in Oxford, you can even, for example, this network that we're talking about, we don't have to start perfect. We might start the network while still using a certain percentage of diesel vehicles. But what you do is together, you rally together until you're able to together afford the electric vehicles. And if you can do it through crowdfunding, or if you can do it through, setting up cooperatives, so whichever way, that's fine. But the most important thing is not, the electric vehicle will solve the problem. It's working together and setting up regional hubs for SESI that will do the trick.
Yeah, it's interesting because it touches on something that has been at the back of my mind while we've been talking. Kind of coincidentally, today I had a chat with a guy that comes in regularly to the shop, and I was telling him about the changes that we're about to make at the shop, and he was talking about how they're keen to sort of, as a family, support what we do, because they know, they can see it's important to do that over and above just coming in and getting certain things. They try to buy a bit extra when they're in, and it was a quiet 20 minutes or so in the shop, so I had a really good conversation with him, really got into some of the details of it, and I love to be able to do that. Again, it's why I started the podcast, really. But it was I was able to get across that point about that's exactly what you need people to do to support us, so that the money that in the economy stays in the local economy and allows us to do more. And then later on in the day, I coincidentally put a podcast on, and Rob Hopkins was the guest on it, was talking about this exact point, was talking about money staying local, not filtering out of the area. And how this model of people supporting their local community enterprises just means that they can do more locally because the money stays there. For me, it's exactly that. It's like the more people that support our shop, the more I can do. People that think, and again, it's about buying into the messages. It's about buying into and trusting the people that that are out there, like ourselves. If people really genuinely know that we're, out there to be as ethical as possible, and we'd like to do more of it, and people support us in that, then we achieve greater things together. And if that's going on around the country, it's exactly the sort of thing that you're talking about, isn't it? How you could then replace your vehicles, take the carbon out of it, if enough people buy into the network.
That's right, absolutely. Then the producers who have so few choices of how they market their produce, and this is a real godsend for them if somebody will work with them and be transparent and not just grind them down to the lowest possible price
Yeah.
that they can produce their thing, which is back to the agricultural worker around the world being ground down by his. I've got to defend the middleman. It's not the middleman. We're in the middle.
Okay, yeah, true.
It's the system, actually. It's the profit-driven system, which just looks to exploit the people they're buying from and the people they're selling to. Grab as much of the cake as they can and create a monopoly. That's the ultimate goal of the current system. Try and corner a market, and then you set the price and you make extraordinary profits, and everybody else just is driven into poverty.
Indeed.
Which sector of the economy is doing that? The banking, the financial sector at the moment in the current world structure can set the prices and can cream off from every transaction. And that's why they just are obscenely wealthy, while the rest of the world is sinking into poverty. End of my political rant.
Hey, no, that I like a good rant.
Yes. I mean, but the other thing is, let's think that this becomes embedded in the way we behave around each other, because it creates a sense of unhealthy competition and a unspoken hidden desire to be the only ones. And even in the ethical sector, that fear and that distrust of the other drives sometimes how we feel about the things we want to do. And it's not anybody's fault. It's completely understandable, because there's two levels here. One is how we are culturally led to think this way in very subtle ways that we don't even notice are happening to us, from advertising to even the schools, and perhaps subconsciously pass on and foment a certain way of looking at things. And I think the other aspect of that is that we, even in the ethical world, as we say, we might be behaving sometimes as if we were corporations. I've noticed that. I mean, not everybody, and most people wouldn't and don't, and certainly not consciously, but there are aspects of our own economies that influence culture. And we all are at it, and we need to self-examine ourselves, and we need to look at what we're doing and why, so that we can then be more bold. Because it's what's brave is not actually to go out there and succeed. What's brave is to go out there and be part of something bigger than yourself.
Yeah, that's inspirational. Yeah, definitely.
But it's true. It's really true. We feel it here in Oxford, very strongly.
Yeah. It's great. Great talking to you about it. Is there anything else that you wanted to get across while we're recording the podcast? Is there anything that you haven't said that you'd like the opportunity to do?
The ethical consumer, I mentioned that. That's lovely.
Oh yeah, do. Yeah.
No, yeah. We're very pleased. We got a great result from the latest ethical consumer magazine report on review of detergents, UK detergents. We came out with the second highest rating, which was wow. And that's really, it's to do with many things, but this attention to the supply chain is one of the things they commented on. Although we feel that we can't see right back down the supply chain. This is chemistry. Making detergents is all about where do the chemicals come from and what are the processes that make those chemicals.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to get information back down the supply chain. But, I suppose we may have got some acknowledgement for wanting to do that and being committed to find ways of manufacturing these things with a properly transparent supply chain. Why shouldn't it be transparent? Why is everybody cagey about where these things come from and want to withhold information? I don't understand it. I think we should be much more open about what the ingredients are, where they come from, what the employment practices of the companies that make these things,
The Ethical Consumer magazine was for us a lovely surprise. It took us by surprise that we were invited, that we were going to be listed, and let alone, honestly, I can tell you with complete honesty, we never thought that we would rank that high, because we are so, I don't want to say hard on ourselves, but probably that is the truth.
Yeah.
Because we're learning all the time. So we don't know what we're learning. We always feel we don't know enough, and we don't, and we don't. And I still feel that we don't. And even if we say next year come out with 16.5, which is the top at the moment, which is Green Sense rank, I would still feel we would I think assess here, and I speak for the whole team, we would feel super pleased and grateful to the Ethical Consumer magazine, to our stockists and the customers of our stockists. But at the same time, we would still feel, well, you never finish the job until you die. And that's just how it is. And it's just, I think, but that doesn't sound very inspirational.
Struggling and then you die.
I'll use that as a quote when I have
the strap line.
But I have to say, but the other thing I feel as well is that, and we will not make a secret of this. Of course, we know there are other companies being part of that process of changing customer behavior and refilling and making products like we are, and now taking the taps back. And we, of course, want those other companies to succeed too. And we would like more people in that list in the Ethical Consumer to seriously do it too. Because look, CESI is, and you can see in the report, we barely just scrap it to £1 million. And so if we can do this across the UK, the Channel Islands, Ireland now, Northern Ireland, if we can do it, we are a workers' partnership, a social enterprise. We don't work for surplus. We don't work for profit. We work for surplus, and the surplus is injected back into our green projects, which there are many, and we will be unfolding them slowly over the year. If we can do it, and we're tiny, and we are not making big bucks here, but we're content. We got food on the plate, and we have that solidarity and that sense of family in the zero waste sector. What else can we want? We're really content in that way. So if we can do it, those with the money, and there are some companies in that list that have got plenty of money, they can do it too. Yeah. And it's important to make it mainstream. It can be done mainstream.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it was from our perspective, and I think from everyone else's, I probably speak for most of your retailers, to see that you got that rating probably wasn't a surprise to us at all, because as you say, I think there's something about being very committed and very passionate and driven by values. You then can sometimes be as you said earlier, there's always more. There's always more to come, and you can be never quite satisfied because there's always, you're always wanting to improve where you are now. That there are. I'm sure when you've seen your ratings, you've probably looked, there's an area that we could improve on next time.
Yeah.
Immediately.
Yeah. And it makes you want to learn more, because let's remember, we're doing this for various reasons, and we're not. I always go into these things, where I feel like, we don't do heroes. What we do feel very strongly is that and we value is community leadership. And I feel that, and I think many people do as well, that through community leadership, you can look at changes like that, and in a more sort of, it's not about the end result, but the ongoing journey, and I think the more you learn, the less you know. And that's, I know it's almost a cliche, you say all the time, but this is true. And even now, say we're using some ingredients now, and then in 5 years it emerges that one of those ingredients, has been sourced in a way that is overexploiting here or there, wherever that may be, the UK or another country. Those things, we are constantly moving and changing. And so that's why honesty, transparency, and conversation is important, because if you have that openness and that connection with people, then you won't feel, as Paul was saying earlier, so paranoid and secretive about what you're doing, or how much money you're making, or what ingredients you're using, and things like that. If you got, you can be open and admit that there is no perfect product. I am the first to say it. When a brand is selling me something perfect, I immediately am suspicious.
Yeah, that's very true, and I'm sure I've said this a couple of times on other episodes. It applies to like refill shops, zero waste shops. I mean, the term zero waste shop has a bit of an issue. I have a bit of an issue with it. I've stopped calling ourselves that, because I think people think that's how we operate as a business, and I'm sure people then put you on a bit of a pedestal. In fact, if they think, in fact, one of my members of staff mentioned a passerby commenting when we'd had a delivery from Infinity on a pallet, and it was pallet wrapped, and they were like, "I thought you were a plastic-free shop," and it's like, you want people to understand that, and it's. Yeah, there are always ways that we could improve, but in some ways, we try to do so much, and it's very easy to get called out for it. I don't know how I got into that thread. I feel like I've completely lost the plot of it now. Anyway, it's been lovely talking to you. I always enjoy when we've met, in person, and we always have a good chat. I was really keen to get you both to come on and do this. So thank you both for your time.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for inviting us along.
Yeah, that's right. Do you know what? Great. Yeah, it's. Do you know what I've had to put up with for the last half hour? I can smell that dal cooking downstairs. Honestly,
lovely.
Off you go then.
And at that point, I did go downstairs and get some dal, and delicious it was too. Thank you for listening to today's episode. Hope you really enjoyed that one. Let us know what you thought of it. Do give us some comments if it's provoked some thoughts. Do let us know. Drop me an email to beyonddayzeropodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow the podcast on our Instagram page @beyonddayzeropodcast. And it would be remiss of me not to mention the place that spawned these podcasts. So our shop, Day Zero, is my business. It's where I am day to day, and it's a refill shop in Buxton in the UK. We're just about to diversify the range of goods that we do, and in a future episode I'm going to be chatting with Sean from Organic North, who is going to be working with me to provide us with some great quality organic foodstuffs, fruit and veg, fresh produce that we're adding to our range in the shop. If you're visiting the Peak District, come and see us in Buxton. Do call in and say hello. I'd really appreciate it. It's a great way of supporting what we do, and it's, there's no financial support initiative for this podcast, so come and see us in the shop, and maybe think about popping one or two things in your basket while you're there. Thank you for all your support so far. See you next time.